Morning. Thanks for having me on.
Talk to me about what you're announcing today. Your department coming together with the housing department.
Yeah, that's right. Today we are setting up a new public corporation that's called Platform 4 to unlock development around train stations using land that is surplus to requirements when it comes to the railways. So it might be previously used maintenance areas, old goods yards, and saying some of these sites in towns and cities across the country are basically derelict at the moment, and we need to breathe new life back into the hearts of our towns and cities. And so we are setting up this new company, Platform 4, so that we can build 40,000 homes over the next decade, as well as new commercial space, new office space, new public space as well. It makes sense to be building in our town centres and our city centres. I think this is all part of the government's plan for change and delivering those 1.5 million homes that we've committed to building in this parliament.
I wanted to ask about the decision to recognise Palestine as a state. The Prime Minister set three conditions for that. If Israel doesn't take substantive steps to ending the situation in Gaza, doesn't agree to a ceasefire and doesn't commit to long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution. If Israel does do all of those three things, does Palestine no longer deserve to be recognised as a state?
Well, what we've said is that we will make an assessment in September prior to the meeting of the UN General Assembly. But we're absolutely clear, given the horror and the gravity of the situation in Gaza at the moment, that it is right now to set out that pathway towards recognising the state of Palestine. As a government, and indeed as the Labour Party, we have always been clear that we would recognise the state of Palestine at a point when it could have maximum effect. It's not been a case of if we would recognise the state of Palestine, but when. And so we think at this stage, given the actions of the Israeli government over recent months, where we've seen whole tracts of Gaza razed to the ground, the effective annexation of the West Bank, children starving and being horrifically maimed in the fighting in Gaza, and also people being shot when they're simply trying to get their hands on the meagre amount of aid that is making its way into Gaza. We need to ratchet up the pressure to lift those restrictions, to get Israel to lift those restrictions on aid coming in, and to get them to commit to that peace process about a two-state solution. And we're doing it now because we think that the viability of that two-state solution is fast disappearing because of the actions of Israel. If they want to be at the table to help shape an enduring peace, then they've got 8 weeks to act. They need to let the aid back in. They need to commit to a ceasefire. They need to stop the annexation in the West Bank, and they need to come to the table in a genuine way to work on that two-state solution. But let's be clear as well, Hamas also have to act. They are a vile terrorist organisation that have committed appalling acts, and the Prime Minister has been absolutely unequivocal in his condemnation of Hamas. They have no place in the future governance of Gaza. They have to release the hostages, 20 of whom now have been held captive for over 600 days. They need to disarm, but we need to use this moment to try and set the region on a different path, because I know that the British public want to see their government doing absolutely everything they can to try and affect change. We don't want to see those images of children starving to death on our television screens, and we've got to stop the bloodshed.
I'm really interested, Minister, that you mentioned some seeming conditions there on the other side for Hamas to take certain actions in order for a Palestinian state to be recognised. The Prime Minister didn't set out those conditions. He just set some conditions on Israel yesterday. So can you clarify for me, are those conditions for Hamas to release the hostages and disarm also necessary conditions for a Palestinian state to be recognised?
What we've said is that we're setting out a pathway to recognise the state of Palestine, and that we will assess the situation again in September. We need Israel to act in the way that I have talked about. We have always said right from day one that the hostages needed to be released. We're absolutely clear that Hamas is a vile terrorist organisation. It has committed heinous crimes, and the wounds of October the 7th will live forever in Israel and in the consciousness of the Israeli people. This isn't about Hamas. This is actually about delivering for the Palestinian people and making sure that we can get aid in. We are participating with our allies in airdrops of aid. They are a poor substitute, if I'm honest, to trucks going in with aid on them. And we need to get to a point where Israel are allowing UN aid back in at scale, at volume, quickly. And so we're using this moment of diplomatic leverage, if you like, to say that we will be recognising the state of Palestine unless Israel commit to taking those substantive steps that I've already talked about.
I'm surprised you say this isn't about Hamas. It might be, in your view, primarily about Israel, but it surely is also about Hamas. And just to conclude, it is not a necessary step for Palestine to be recognised as a state for Hamas to release the hostages.
We will be making an assessment in September. We've said that very clearly. The Prime Minister said that very clearly yesterday. Israel need to let aid in. They need to commit to a ceasefire, stop the annexation in the West Bank, and commit to that peace process about a two-stage solution. We've always been absolutely clear that the hostages also need to be released as well. And you will have seen today some of the Arab states also making clear their position.
So is that a necessary step for a Palestinian state to be recognised or not?
Sorry, I didn't catch that last question, Wilf.
Is it a necessary step for Hamas to release the hostages for a Palestinian state to be recognised?
This is part of a process, and we've said that we will be making an assessment in September prior to the UN General Assembly meeting.
OK. Final question. I just wanted to move on to a story which I'm sure you saw kind of dominated the agenda yesterday, stemmed from a conversation on this programme. Do you personally believe that Nigel Farage is on the side of Jimmy Savile?
So I think the point that Peter Kyle, the Technology Secretary, was making yesterday when he was on your programme was that the Online Safety Act is absolutely essential for protecting children and young people from sexual predators and from seeing totally inappropriate content online. Of course, we've got a situation where Nigel Farage and Reform are saying that they will repeal the Online Safety Act in its entirety. And I think Peter was rightly making the point that actually, you know, the likes of Jimmy Savile, when they were committing those heinous crimes decades ago, if social media had been around at that point in time, don't kid yourself, the likes of Jimmy Savile would have been online seeking to get access to children in the way that the Online Safety Act now is seeking to prevent. And so I think that was the point that Peter was making.
Well, let me just say specifically what he said. He said, quote, "Make no mistake about it, if people like Jimmy Savile were alive today, he'd be perpetrating his crimes online, and Nigel Farage is saying he's on their side." Do you agree with that statement?
Well, Nigel Farage is in effect saying that he is on their side because he's saying he's wanting to repeal the Online Safety Act.
So you think he's on
the Online Safety?
You think he's on? You think Nigel Farage? You think Nigel Farage is on the side of paedophiles?
So I think that the position of Reform in saying that they want to repeal the entirety of the Online Safety Act, which is one of the most important pieces of legislation when it comes to the protecting our children and the safety of young people online, I think that in effect what Nigel Farage is saying is that he's totally happy for there to be a free-for-all on the internet. That's not the position of the Labour government. It's not the position of me. It's not the position of Keir Starmer or Peter Kyle. And that is the point that the Technology Secretary was rightly making yesterday.
Transport Secretary, we're out of time, and we thank you very much for joining us this morning. Good to see you.
Thank you.